One of the most frequent questions I get asked is, "Hey, Azul, how do I compare? How am I doing on my journey towards being able to retire?" So in this video, I want to share with you what the average American savings are at the age of 55, 60, and 65 years old. And whether you're close to those age or you're 10 or 20 years away, it's still good to know how you compare. So let's jump in. We're going to talk about three things. First, how much Americans think that they need to retire, and then how much they should have to retire, and then how much do they actually have. And I'm going to go through three different reports from three different respected institutions to share this information. The first one's by Northwestern Mutual, and it's going to address how much do Americans think that they need to retire, and you're going to be surprised. This is their report, How Much Do I Need to Retire? And believe it or not, it's a little over $1.5 million. I can share with you, and you're going to see in this video, very few Americans have $1.5 million. But that's what we think that we need. Interestingly, just a couple years ago, that number was $1 million. But I think because of inflation over the last 4 or 5 years, that number has jumped quite a bit to $1.5 million. Okay, the next question is, how much do I need to retire? And for this, I'm going to go to Fidelity. They have a fairly famous report. How much do I need to retire is what it's called. And they have this chart, and I like this chart because it shows us by age how much Fidelity thinks we should have saved in order to be on track to be able to retire. So Fidelity says by the time you're 30 years old, you should have 1 times your salary saved. By the time you're 35 years old, you should have 2 times. By the time you're 40, you should have 3 times. So let's use an example. If you're making $100,000 a year, Fidelity would say by 40, you should have $300,000 saved. We're going to find out that, again, very few Americans are able to save this amount. Okay, by 45, they say 4 times. By 50, they should have 6 times. By 55, they should have 7 times. So this is when we're entering where people are thinking about retiring, 55. And so Fidelity would say you should have 7 times your money saved, but Fidelity is planning on people retiring at 67, as we'll see here. So at 60 years old, Fidelity says we should have 8 times our salary saved, and by 67, we should have 10 times. So again, using this example of somebody making $100,000 a year, Fidelity would say by the time you're 67, you should have $1 million saved, which is quite a bit less than the $1.5 million that people think that they need to retire. I can tell you as a financial advisor, I was dealing with people that had done a good job of saving. So $1 million was a fairly standard number for the folks that I was working with. But as we're going to see here, very few Americans have $1 million saved for retirement by the time they're 67. Okay, for the next report, we're going to turn to Vanguard. But before we go there, I do want to talk about so few Americans having $1 million saved. And the reason is it takes a lot in order to save $1 million. If you can save $10,000 a year, and in your portfolio, which would likely be a mix of stocks and bonds, if you can get a 7% return on that, it takes almost 8 years to save your first $100,000. And then you can see with this chart here, it takes another 5 years to get to 200,000. So to double that, what I like about this chart is it shows us how much of the money that we're saving is, or the increase in our net worth, how much of that is coming from money that we're putting into the account versus our dollars working hard for us and our dollars growing. So while it took 8 years to save the first $100,000, the second $100,000, so to go from 100,000 to 200,000, takes a little over 5 years, and you can see about half of that down below. Half of that, the 51%, comes from savings, and then the returns are the other half of that. And if we go all the way to the extreme here to get to Fidelity's $1 million, to go from 900,000 to $1 million, so again, it's a gain of 100,000. But in this case, a person gets there in about 16 months, 1.35 years. And you can see there only 14% of the money that is gained in that 1.35 years is money that you and I had to put into the account, and the rest of it is from the money growing. But if you add up all these years, it's about 30 years to get there. So it's a long path. It's a path that you have to start early, and you have to be disciplined and continue to save. Okay, let's go to Vanguard and let's look at what they have. Now, Vanguard is a custodian for 401ks or a custodian for IRAs. And so this is from their defined contribution plans, which would be things like 401ks, 403bs, things like that. And these are the account balances in those accounts. So if we look here at the age, and this is actually a really good report. We'll unblur all of it towards the end, and you can pause it to see some other information. But you can see people less than 25, they've got about $7,000 saved. They're just starting their savings journey. 25 to $30,000, 25 to 34 years old, they've got a little under $38,000 saved. 35 to 44, they have a little over $90,000 saved. Now we're getting into the video topic. 45 to 54, they've got a little under 170,000 saved. 55 to 64, they have about a little under $245,000 saved. And finally, 65 plus, they've got a little over 270,000 saved. But first off, that's the average. If you look at the median is quite a bit less, right? 65 plus. So half the people are doing better, half the people are doing worse. That number is under $90,000. So why is that? Well, there's a couple of reasons for this. First off, it's just the 401k balances. It's just the defined contribution balances. It's not a person's entire net worth. And to get that, we have to go to data by the Federal Reserve. Every 3 years, they do a survey consumer finance report. And here we can see the median net worth. So this is net worth. This is household net worth, which is important. So if there's two working adults in a household, this would be the combination of the two. And net worth is the value of all your assets minus your liabilities. So for most of us, that would be our savings accounts, our 401ks, IRAs, things like that, and then also the home equity in our house. So it does include that. And these numbers typically are about half of this money is the home equity in the house, which for most of us, unless we're going to sell our house in retirement, is illiquid and it's not money to live off of. So going again, under 35 years old, the median is a little under $40,000. 35 to 44, it's $135,000. 45 to 54 is $247,200. Okay, now we're getting into the heart of it where people start retiring. 55 to 64, the median household net worth is a little under $365,000. 65 to 74 is a little under $410,000. So you can see it grows after people initially start to retire. And then 75 plus, the number starts coming down as people start spending their money. And it's about $250,000. But it's also interesting to see what's the top quartile and what's the top 10% of that. And for that, we're going to go to Kiplinger's. And so the 75th percentile net worth by age, you can see here under 35. So these are people in the top quartile of society. It's a little over 150,000. 35 to 44, it's a little over 400,000. 45 to 54, so people in the top quartile that are 45 to 54, it's 800,000. 55 to 64 is when it peaks out at 1.122 million. So this is when people are in the heart of retirement. So these folks, the median net worth is in the top quartile is 1.122 million. Then it goes down a little bit for 65 to 74, still about $1.2 million. And then 75 and above, it drops down below $1 million. How about the top 10% of people? For the top 10% of society in the United States, under 35, top 10%, median net worth is $372,000. So this is a big number for people under 35, but again, this is the top 10%. 35 to 44 is $1.05 million. 45 to 54 is $1.974 million. 55 to 64 is almost $3 million. 65 to 74, it squeaks up a little closer to $3 million. And then 75 plus, it starts coming down to $2.7 million. If you enjoyed this video, the YouTube algorithm says this is the next video of mine that's specifically for you that you'll enjoy watching. Thanks for watching this one. Bye-bye.